Hello again, everybody. We've had a great first session which talked about the business possibilities. The most important takeaway for me from the first session was the statistics with respect to why or in what manner the business potential is moving in blockchain, right? I'm going to have to wait for my presentation to just come up. There it is now. So this is just, I'm not saying that law or regulation is going to be your solution to all problems, but this is a very powerful solution which we have here. Well, when we look at it in terms of solutions or otherwise, we've also seen the situation where everybody thought that blockchain was going to be the answer to every problem or ailment, right? We cannot have a one-size-fits-all solution, but let's see how or in what manner law is going to be of help. I'm talking about not just the Indian scenario, but predominantly focusing on India. When we speak about India, we are also already discussing systemic failure in India, about how laws may not have necessarily delivered the way they were expected to. And yet, here I am saying that law is an enabler. How do I, or why do I say that? And before I start, may I request for a little bit of a show of hands on how many of you have questions with respect to law? Because that way, I will decide whether I want to cut my, perfect. Thank you all. Because then I'll cut short the presentation and I'll give more time for the Q&A. I think that would benefit everybody here a lot more. Well, I don't think this is working. There, so it was the other arrow. So a little bit on the who, what, where, when, why, how, but then not too much into the blockchain aspect of it. As Martha rightly said, it did not really start with bitcoins. Blockchain was a fabulous technology which brought in, as you all know, two things: open source and cryptography. The difficulty that the technology faced, however, was that its popularity, general perception or awareness about the technology rested substantially on its exposure through its usage for cryptocurrency. So with that kind of a beginning in terms of its positioning, the difficulty that the technology faced in terms of investments or evolution, as Martha mentioned, was the inability of people to understand how or in what manner the technology can be segregated from the product. How and in what manner the technology can work independent of its first well-identified product. So when we talk about how and in what manner the technology works, a little bit on the background, because it shows the evolution in terms of law also for the Indian scenario. So this is just a heat map which kind of indicates about, the cryptocurrency situation. What did we have in India, and where do we segregate the product from the technology? We have had a lot of uncertainty in India from 2013 because the government was still trying to evaluate what it wanted to do with cryptocurrency. Finally, it took a very strong stand only in April 2018, nearly 5 years after its first circular, giving out warnings and saying that we are going to be evaluating. We are now almost in 2020. So between 2018, when the circular was issued, till date, all that you have on board today is a draft bill for banning of cryptocurrency. How and in what manner is it likely to impact blockchain is the reason why I have included this particular topic also in the presentation. This is just again the legal or the judicial evolution in terms of cryptocurrencies on the various public interest litigations and actions that were initiated to, on one hand, regulate or ban cryptocurrencies, and on the other hand, allow for dealing in cryptocurrencies. Again, there has been no clear or definitive action that has come out of, or definitive direction that has come out of all these cases that have been initiated. We now come to the draft of this bill. Now, when you go a little back on this, there were two government committees that were set up. The first one, after the Dalmia case in 2017, and then again in 2018. Now, when we were given this draft by the second committee, now broadly its intention comes out very clearly from the draft itself or the name of the act itself. But the issue that you really need to focus on is not just the provisions. Okay, I don't know where the pointer is in this, but let's just look at all the portions which I have highlighted. One of the things that you will see there is the definition of cryptocurrency includes tokens of any manner whatsoever, right? So when you look at the definition of tokens, and it says that token not being part of any official digital currency generated through cryptographic means or otherwise, providing a digital representation of the value that it adds. See, when some of the earliest instances for POCs or even for advisory on blockchain that I have dealt with were all about permissionless or permission but with a much broader environment, right? Every single fabric in that sense was contingent on the use of some form of tokenization because they were all consistently incentivized blockchains. Now, when you're talking about a blockchain, independent of the product which is cryptocurrency here, let's just take that as the first point of entry. And you're talking about all the other use cases. Let's just evaluate some of the use cases which were put before you already and which you're familiar with. Fintech will come right on top, right? Supply chain management, absolutely they're right on top. You have products which are in real form or physical form. You're no longer having products which are also cryptography, cyber, digital, whichever way you want to categorize them. You're using a digital solution for this real-time product in terms of traceability, transparency, certainty, etc. When you're doing this, how do you ensure that the technology which has now been delinked from the product will still work effectively in validating or providing integrity for the chain or flow of that product? One example, we have talked about all the other use cases in supply chain. Let me tell you an interesting case I was dealing with, which was for sustainable fashion. I thought that's always a great topic to take. Wow, who amongst us doesn't like to shop, right? So in sustainable fashion, this was a client from UAE. So he's still in a better position than in India, where we have all this uncertainty with respect to tokenization, etc. Now, the way he wanted to do this was to ensure that from the stage of production of the yarn to the final product and its traceability beyond that, even to second sales, etc., it would be blockchain enabled. Just imagine how nicely you will be able to build this technology into a scenario where you are going to be able to affirm to the buyer that the products used in the development of the final outcome have all followed systems or processes which you believe in. For instance, organic development of the yarn, not using child labor as any part of the evolutionary process of the product. So this was what we were working on. But ultimately, everything still boiled down to tokens as the incentive, tokens as the business promotional methodology, and tokens as the payment process. Now when you are dealing with blockchain for a product, and you are dealing with a payment mechanism which is also clearly within that part which is talked about here, generated through cryptographic means and intended to be used with a specified or an evolving value, because the value could be as specified through its affirmation and or linked to fiat currency, or value as it is likely to grow, as in for instance a share or a stock in a company, right? So if you're going to link the product, which the technology of blockchain with tokens as a process, you're going to be hit already with this bill if it ever comes through. Now this is where you stand in terms of India, and not just cryptocurrency but blockchain as a technology, or blockchain as an environment which you will build using some form of incentivization. Now when we talk about India again, the concerns are not just for cryptocurrency. It's going to hit you equally with respect to blockchain technology. One other example, I gave you an example of a genuine case I was handling. I was sharing with the gentleman who very graciously helped us from the organization, Kerala Blockchain Academy. Yesterday, I was discussing this with him. The worrisome part about the flip side of development of blockchain technology in India has been this. Everybody's introduction happened substantially over here through cryptocurrency. There was already a lot of speculation in that as a product, and then it spilt over because of the excitement. Who amongst us doesn't like a new toy, right? All of us love our new toys and we love to experiment. And today India is, it is accepted that we are a young nation. I'm not talking about myself, though I do believe I am too, but I'm not just talking about myself. We are a young nation. The young millennials are a lot more confident when they decide on investments. They're not as conservative as the earlier generation, and I am of course pointing to myself on that, right? So they are a lot more open to invest, and what better than technology for them. Now here is a situation I'm faced with as a question, and this is how the business model is. Oh, we are developing our own blockchain technology. It's primarily based on the Ethereum blockchain. And we are also developing our own cryptocurrency, which is what will be which will be used for incentivization. It will be a permissionless blockchain, etc., etc. So then you ask about the cryptocurrency and how it is going to be valued, how is it going to be pegged to the fiat currency, and what is the business model, what is the blockchain technology going to be used for. And this was the business model. Oh, but madam, the cryptocurrency will be based on the value that people pay for it. The blockchain technology is the product for the company, but its valuation will be based on how much of investments we get into it. So effectively, the person's structure was a circular structure. So he is selling you an idea of a business, and the idea of the business is only contingent on the money that you are paying to him. It is, in very simple terms, a Ponzi scheme. So when we talk blockchain technology and investments, particularly early day investments in India, what we faced was, because of the lack of awareness of the technology and its capabilities, because of people's inability to distinguish between what is the technology and what has to be a final product, it resulted in a lot of scams also. Now with this difficulty, the issue that arises, and therefore we move to the next stage in terms of my presentation. What is it that law helps us with? You know, I have used Thoreau's code in my book in this particular manner, and I think you can visually, it is visually evocative, this statement, that technology is hurtling us towards the precipice without any brakes, no control, and most importantly, no plan whatsoever. We have something very futuristic, we have something with a lot of potential before us, and therefore we want to be part of that ecosystem. And we jump right in, we don't really think about consequences, but when things go wrong, we'll come back to law to help us, right? And that's when the difficulty arises, because even the most genuine business is now going to be evaluated by courts, but heaven help you, more importantly, police, who do not know anything about technology, right? So you have to explain to them what is blockchain, why is it relevant. You have to justify a business to them for you to even show them that you're not committing a scam or you're not committing some illegal act. This is the uncertainty with which you will be entering into the scenario. I don't mean to paint a bleak picture for blockchain technology here. This is the reality. Today all of us talk about how data is the new gold, etc., right? I'm handling a case which is about 10 years old or more, where the whole business concept relied on collection of data from multiple users and then providing them with products or services which they wanted based on the data which they had submitted. This was also treated as a Ponzi scheme, because as on that date, the police did not understand the importance of data. So therefore, we move to the next stage in terms of how can law be the enabler to increase or sustain or make these predictions a reality. I'm also relying on the Deloitte report of 2019, but I'm relying on it for some data points which are slightly different from what has already been relied on. And particularly if you look at the, sorry, that's the Delhi bug for you. The second point there, regulatory issues. So the first percentage that is there is of 2019, and the second one listed there is of 2018. When you see even over 1 year, you will notice the increase in terms of perception of importance of regulatory matters. You'll see why people believe that regulation can actually help you. Today, social media platforms on an aside have reached a stage where they believe that regulations can actually help them grow better instead of becoming an impediment. So moving forward, how do we take care of these uncertainties? How do we ensure that you're not going to have to justify your businesses merely because a law enforcement agency or judiciary may not understand what your business or technology is? You know, I love this picture only because it shows you that not one of you would want to drive a car without brakes, right? You can speed in your car only when you have brakes. And I always say law or regulation are the brakes in your car which help you to actually speed. It's not something which stops you from driving your car. Going forward again, the bureaucrat man or the bureaucracy or regulations are not necessarily against innovation. They are actually supposed to help innovation. How can it help innovation, and how can we figure out the yin and yang of it? Some global perspectives here. One of the earliest things that the US laws did was to actually give legal credibility, legal validation to smart contracts. In Indian law, under the Information Technology Act, you already have a provision which allows for e-contracts to be recognized without a physical signature. You can read smart contracts into it and say that smart contracts are also legally valid because the provision clearly says the absence of a signature will not in itself invalidate a transaction. But then think about a scenario where somebody just simply adds 2 lines and says smart contracts are valid merely because a transaction has been concluded using a smart contract. The same shall not be deemed to be invalid or ineffective. So the minute something specific like that comes up, it already provides that validation you need, whereby you don't have to go and explain your business or technology to law enforcement. You have a lot more coming up in terms of also not just laws on smart contract or acceptance in terms of blockchain or enablers in terms of blockchain technology, but also enablers in helping the business innovation move forward. Some use cases, I'm sure you already know about the mobile voting platform where they say that you can just vote from wherever you are. You know, Estonia already introduced that and they continue to use that, but of course not necessarily in terms of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was moving backwards. So let's just move forward to some of the other countries. I'm just going to choose some and then just rely on that because it's very interesting in terms of how when you link it back to India. Right? Dubai, as we already discussed, it said no to cryptocurrency, yes to blockchain. It wants to make blockchain the enabler for every possible aspect of governance. But curiously, they also, it's not like cryptocurrency is dead in Dubai, they just turn a blind eye to it. That's no way to work. India did the same thing from 2013 to 18, and all it did was it encouraged people to invest, speculate, call it what you will. And then suddenly they find that the rug is pulled from under their feet, and that's not a very nice situation to be in, right? Singapore has always been very good in terms of jumping onto the bandwagon. One of the recent cases which I have listed here, it's not just about the regulators, courts are also on board now, where they have treated cryptocurrency in this case itself as a property. If that is a situation with respect to cryptocurrency, you're not going to have much difficulty with respect to blockchain. Now, when we move to Liechtenstein, and this was what I was looking for, here is a law which is specific to tokens. It talks about, because you know already Liechtenstein even otherwise has its freer market with respect to cryptocurrency. But when they come in with a law which is specific for tokens, delineated from cryptocurrency, maybe, you know, anchor it to fiat currency, then you have an enabler which may, you know, build permissionless systems which are by definitely the less expensive alternative further. These are just options. India doesn't necessarily have to pick and choose from this. Ideally, it should not plagiarize and just do a copy paste. It should look at the socio-economic fabric of India when it is deciding which way it wants to head. Use cases, I'm just going to kind of literally skim through, except to, you know, pause over here for 1 minute. One of the things that always comes up in every single discussion on blockchain is whether it's just a solution looking for a problem. Did we already do legacy systems which we already have? Are they enough to meet the requirement, or do we really need blockchain as a technology? Even if we don't need blockchain as a technology and we just want it, is it something that is viable? Or is it just something that is being touted as the next best thing, and therefore, you know, there lies the difficulty in terms of why it has not had the exponential growth that it was envisaging. I feel that the high that we saw and the low we are seeing today, in a way is a good thing. You have gone past the stage of hype. You have now reached the stage of reality checks, right? So when you're looking at blockchain and when you're looking at validating or supporting it as a cause or as a technology or as a business proposition, use cases are what are going to get you the best foot forward. But for you to get use cases, but for those use cases to be not just POC but actually implemented solutions, you need something of certainty here. Let's just quickly run through some use cases to see how the assumption of blockchain just being a solution looking for a problem may not necessarily be correct, right? All of you know just the one thing which has already been highlighted, I think the Corda blockchain. It shows that usage in terms of fintech is possible, but the very transparency and the immutability aspect of blockchain may be also the negative in terms of its usage in fintech. And here again is where therefore I believe law needs to play a role. Moving forward, we talked about the supply chain management processes. Again, when we are talking about supply chain management, the possibility of blockchain rooting out corruption, the possibility of blockchain taking away scams in terms of supply chain and ensuring a smooth flow is clearly there. What we really need today is an enabler which will help in the manner in which the technology can be applied to the process of supply chain. You're not going to and you should not have regulations which are going to be specific only to a vertical or a sector. But even general regulations which will give guidance will be enablers here. A lot of other opportunities and possibilities that I've put up here. Let's go further to, and I thought as a lawyer I would also point out the importance of blockchain for law also. I would say that there are very few use cases that have still come even as on date. I would say one of the biggest usage of blockchain for law would be accountability. We are talking about India's systemic failure also because of the humongous backlog in cases. Imagine a blockchain technology enabled process which will make every level in that chain accountable for when and in what manner a case is dealt with from its genesis to its conclusion at the highest level. That is what blockchain technology can bring even in a field like law, which is, I'm saying even in a field like law because it's one of the most traditional legacy professions, right? So India now, very, very quickly. Whilst India has made its position very clear that it is not supporting cryptocurrency, repeated statements from the government have come saying that they are very, very clearly supporting the distributed ledger system. Having said that, what we really need today is in what manner is the government going to help you or support you, right? Look at how things are moving. You had an RBI circular on cryptocurrency which said banking processes cannot be used for any form of cryptocurrency transactions. And they also put in the act, of course, because otherwise it's very opaque in terms of whether RBI circular covers tokens also or only cryptocurrency. But my interpretation of it would be that it indeed would cover tokens the minute those tokens are being utilized as payment systems. Because under Indian law, any form of payment system, any payment mechanism is regulated and is under the control only of RBI. And therefore, if you're using by whatever name called, token or otherwise a payment mechanism in your environment, then you need to necessarily figure out the permissions and processes. But here you have a very clear validation of the technology for telecom and commercial communications. The reason I touched upon the RBI aspect is to show you how, having taken a very definitive stand with respect to cryptocurrencies, RBI has still made its position very clear distinctively with respect to blockchain technology. Of course, this is a process where you're expected to register. SEBI also has a sandbox mechanism for registration of technology innovations, and then they'll probably evaluate and come forward with some more concrete regulations to help you. Some of the things which I thought closer to home may help us and give us courage in the future that we have are, of course, you know of India Chain, which my only concern about this, and we will take it offline on that, is its linkage to India Stack and what it entails for data protection, etc. When we talk about India Chain independent of India Stack or any of the other processes, and in the light of the personal data protection bill that was that has been approved by the cabinet and is awaiting assent from the parliament, think of the potential or the possibilities that blockchain can bring to data protection. Again, that's more a business idea than a law idea, but it's all interlinked, right? You have all these options. Of course, all of you know Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Chaudhary is here, and we were part of one of the earliest fintech initiatives in Vizag. So we know that Andhra Pradesh leads the fray in terms of adapting innovation and technology. No surprise, therefore, that it was the first off the board. We have a lot of other initiatives and use cases, maybe at POC stage, but more of, at least the developmental processes and the intent to adapt is still there. So with all these happening in India, where do we stand in terms of law? I always say that, in this curve, when you have technology and innovation, you reach that tipping point. At that tipping point and up to that tipping point, allowing technology or innovation to grow organically of its own accord is the best possible way to ensure it grows faster than trying to tie it down with regulation when it is just here at this level. So when it is moving to this stage, why is it the tipping point? At this stage, you want it to move further and become part of an automatic natural setup, right? You don't want it to be an exception. You don't want it to be just the new kid on the block. So this tipping point then decides whether it regresses and dies, as all those predictions of 2016 which were pointed out, or grows as the potential that all those use cases are showing us. Now this tipping point is still paused like this on a seesaw as far as India is concerned. On one hand, the stated intent of encouraging distributed ledger systems, stated intent of promoting or supporting blockchain technologies, the use cases by government where the adaptation and the intent to adapt are clearly visible, all these are indicators that the technology is here to stay and it is definitely going to grow. It is definitely at the upward spectrum of the curve right now. But that tipping point can get so much strengthened if there can be laws. We don't need laws. Like I repeat myself here, we don't need laws for each and every new technology that comes. But when the law that is currently there may not be sufficient to give clarity on a particular subject, where you do not want to be faced with that situation where you have to answer to the credibility of the work you're doing, then law plays a hand in being the enabler to help you move forward. One of the most basic attributes of law is certainty. And that is the certainty you need when we are talking about law as the enabler here. So I am going to close with this and open it out for Q&A. I hope I have stuck to my shorter timeline here. May I have time? Okay, one of you keep track and let me know how many questions we can take. Sure, sure. Yeah, so may I request for the, yes. So if you can put your hands up, I will then know how, which, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And yes, you asked for it earlier, so we'll take 6 questions. Anything more, I'm available at the venue today as well as tomorrow, and happy to take questions offline too. But request that the questions be kept really short and we don't do multiple questions, right? So that we give everybody opportunity. Yeah, please, sir. Yeah, I'll just repeat the question then. Yeah.
Madam, it was really a wonderful speech, and it's an eye-opener. You've done a lot of research in blockchain technology. As you're aware, technologies rule the world. We, India and all these third world countries become third world countries because we are very slow in adopting latest technologies and inventions. Otherwise, we could have conquered the entire universe with this kind of brain. As you are aware, the foundation of internet was initially done by a 14-year-old Tamil boy called Shiva in 1981. He developed the first email system and all. But anyway, one thing is clear, the whole concept of blockchain is based on the concept that anything on a central server system can be manipulated. Just like our electronic voting machine, the people who control the central server system, they can manipulate anything. And the biggest curse of mankind is centralization of power and money, especially in the third world countries. So blockchain come as a blessing to the entire humanity. There is no doubt about that. And right from birth to death, every human in this universe is going to come in blockchain with the next few years. There is no doubt about that. So regarding the cryptocurrencies, now you understand that most of the business in China are happening through Bitcoin. If we don't know how to deal with the digital currency, it is very difficult to deal with the other world in terms of business and all. Okay, because I'm coming from Canada, millions of people are working blockchain in Canada. So I don't know what's happening in India, who are afraid of this technology, because they all say corrupt people always
the
afraid of
question,
this
sir,
technology.
if I may ask?
Yeah. So, what I would like to ask you, may I know the upcoming regulations of India about digital currency and other important,
so as far as digital currencies are concerned, I had already shown you what is the upcoming regulation. That is the only draft that is still available in terms of where the government is intending to go. Whether that's a draft which will be approved by cabinet, will be tabled, etc., is still moot. So because this is just something that a government has come up with, it has not even been put forward for public consultation. You all know that the recent trend has been that whenever a draft is formulated, first it's put up for public consultation, then any modifications to the draft are also then put up for the public to view, and only thereafter it is taken to Parliament. So we'll have to wait and see whether India is going to take a different position on that. As far as the blockchain aspect of it is concerned, I'm totally with you that we should not be scared of technologies. Just think of this one use case, use of blockchain in banks. We've been talking about fintech and banking. Imagine the situation that we would have faced if we had adapted blockchain before all the scams that have happened. PNB, which I have listed, is just one of them. Look at every other issue that is coming up thereafter. All these could have possibly been rooted out if we had adapted blockchain technology. But if we are going to adapt blockchain technology, there is bound to be some changes in terms of regulation for each vertical also, but that can be done through delegated legislation. That's a very short answer. We'll take the rest of it offline. So the gentleman there, and he had put his hand up earlier, so and then we'll go back and then to the side.
Ma'am, we have a request. So please write down your questions and your name. We'll hand over the questions to her so that we don't waste asking questions.
Hello.
Correct. And but now that it's
Now he can continue.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just
But request for the question to be really short, please, because we are running short on time.
I'm Vijay from Rego Technologies, Malaysia. My question is, what does Indian government stand on data residency for financial institutions? The reason behind my question is for startups to tap into or serve financial institutions, they can afford only cloud. So I just want to know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've given a lot of sound bites already yesterday after all this melee happened with the data protection bill coming up. There is good news for you, because you already know about the RBI circular, which has already said that financial data has to be localized. Now, what happened in the revised draft, 2018, there was a PDP, the Personal Data Protection Bill draft, which said that everything should have a mirror image in India, and critical data was supposed to be totally localized, and there was a possibility that financial data will form part of that critical data segment. Now what has happened is all draft provisions which were there pertaining to sensitive personal data and critical data have been revised in the 2019 draft. Everything that was specific has been deleted. The only provision with respect to SPD that has been retained is the fact that the central government, in consultation with the authority, which is the Data Protection Authority, and with sectoral regulators, so you will have to assume RBI will be one of them, right, will be consulted for localization of SPD. Now SPD includes financial data. Therefore, there is a possibility that this localization process may continue, but there are also provisions or exceptions to the localization which specifically say, and it literally adapts the 8th principle, which we are already familiar with, the data protection principle, which says that you will not transfer the data to a country where the laws are not as strong as that of the country which is transferring the data. So they have adapted that as one of the exceptions, even for critical data. And therefore, there is a high possibility that whatever little remains of the localization provisions also may not necessarily apply across the board, that it will be relaxed for a substantial bit of the data transfers. So broadly, localization is quietly, or rather dying a quiet death. We don't know. We'll have to wait and watch on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Not at all. Sir.
Thank you. Morning. Sriram from PwC. Question is GDPR's right to be forgotten and the potential data protection bill that is getting tabled in the parliament. How, in your view, is it going to be impacting the adoption of blockchain in this country from a legal perspective?
I don't think the PDP bill is really going to impact adoption of blockchain. In fact, it can be an enabler. Like I said already, according to me, with the PDP bill coming, with companies having to affirm privacy by design. So for instance, under the new PDP bill draft, you have a process where each company can evolve its own privacy by design process. This process has to be tabled with the authority, and the Data Protection Authority can affirm it, in which case then you follow your privacy by design process. The minute I say privacy by design, I am sure all the technologists in the room are already, their minds are clicking, saying, oh, what better way to ensure privacy by design than blockchain, right? Okay, all of you stand in line. After I finish, I will collect my fees for all these ideas from there. So, you know, according to me, it's actually a great thing for blockchain technology. And this is just one of the opportunities there. There is so much more, and it really doesn't impact the growth of technology as an independent process otherwise. So there was one at the back and one here. Okay, so please, since you have the mic, please go ahead. And if you could give the mic to the last person in the back, then we just close it out with that. Yeah.
The question was, I saw the proposed regulation on tokens as pretty restrictive. So the question is, what about stable coins?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The proposed regulation on tokens and coins
yes,
were very
yes.
restrictive. How about stable coins?
See, now stable coin, according to me, will fall clearly within the ban. Because how a stable coin is just one way, as I read it, as what was being promised through crypto funds or ICOs, etc., which is that we will create a token, we will ensure the stability of its value, but the value will be pegged to multiple cryptocurrencies. If the basic, the structure of the initiative itself is criminal or illegal, then how can the end product, which is stable coin, be permitted? Right? So as far as the entire cryptocurrency gamut is concerned, this is where you have a difficulty. That everything is being painted with the same brush or in the same colors. It's not really delineating or distinguishing between one or the other. So anything and everything that uses the word cryptocurrency in any form is going to be tainted. And therefore, it may be viable to review the draft of the Banning of Cryptocurrency Act to see what exactly should or should not be. And it, in fact, actually, it ties into the first question that this gentleman asked. It's a very important thing in terms of perspective. What is the fear of government in allowing cryptocurrency, right? I didn't want to take it then because I thought I'll focus more on blockchain, but to very briefly answer you on that, and which will answer your question also. That is the basis or foundation of the economic growth. If you are putting forward an alternative economy, an alternative payment process, which is not going to be regulated, which is not accountable to any single jurisdiction, then you are actually threatening the very fabric of the economy of a nation as a standalone entity or the world economy at worst. And therefore, unless there is a process where cryptocurrencies can be integrated more as a product rather than the misleading, nomenclature of currency, it is always going to face this resistance. So the final question at the back.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, consider the government comes on board with the blockchain, with integration of blockchain stuff. Areas like, let's say, land ownership. So the thing is, in India especially, the people have a lot of say on how the policies actually end up. But taking the example of land ownership and selling, practices now, there are a lot of malpractices, let's say. So for example, undervaluing plots of land so that, both parties benefit so that they don't have to pay taxes and such if you value it as less. So bringing blockchain into this would cut that possibility completely. And that would not fly well with the general public because of the situation the country is in right now. So how do we overcome that? How do we get the public onto our side, even though, they don't have the chance of doing all this stuff after that?
Well, it's not like, we don't have to assume that every single individual's ultimate goal is to figure out how he can cheat or,
common practice, so
Well, saving a penny is not a wrong thing, right? But otherwise, let me tell you, I'm glad to finish this session with this input. I personally believe that the real big problem with blockchain and its usage dehors a digital product is, as with everything else in technology, the human, right? Your human is your weakest link. Because what happened when, I'm just using this as an example to show how the best of technologies can be defeated. Digital signatures. So digital signatures use the same cryptography technology, and the whole intent and purpose was to ensure that this signature will be sacrosanct. It can be traced, any modification can be traced, you cannot cheat, you will do this, you will do that, etc. What happened? The human found a way to circumvent it. One of the largest cases, which is why you now have to go through a much more strenuous multi-factor authentication process for your digital signature, emanated from Bombay. So a set of people were able to take over a company by use of digital signatures, or should I say misuse of it, including applying in somebody else's name, using their KYC papers, etc. So similarly in blockchain, what I see is that the human, when, the minute the product is delinked from the technology and you're only using the technology to track the data, you're no longer using the technology to track the product, unlike cryptocurrency. And that's why I'm harping on that again and again, because it brings in such a big difference the minute you delink both, because then the data is sacrosanct. Like the digital signature is always sacrosanct, it doesn't change. But who applied it changes, right? That I didn't use it, somebody else misused it, is still an argument open for me. Similar with blockchain, the data transfers, the data authentication process that it enables is sacrosanct. But whether the data that is fed in, whether the data that the human element brings in is valid or not, is always going to be suspect. So that is the last mile gap which you are not going to be able to plug. It should not affect the adaptation of the technology, because I'm sure it will bring in a lot more benefits than just this last mile issue. But this is something you have to keep in mind as a limitation of the technology when you are applying it to use cases which don't, by the very process itself, ensure the integrity of the data. Yeah. With that, thank you all. And as I said, I will be available and look forward to more interesting dialogues.